After World War II, the world was split up into two groups. The United States, who wanted to spread democracy around the world, and the Soviet Union, who wanted to spread communism around the world. It was a tense time known as the Cold War. The war was between the USA and the Soviet Union, but they didn't really fight since both of them had nukes, and if they used them, this would happen to the world. Since they didn't fight, they made other countries fight for them, which was called proxy wars. And some popular proxy wars were the Korean War and the war we're going to talk about today, the Vietnam War. Vietnam used to be a French colony, but after a revolution, they were able to become an independent country. After the revolution, Vietnam was split into two countries. First, North Vietnam, which was communist, and second, South Vietnam, which was democratic. The US didn't want communism to spread around Asia, so they started funding South Vietnam with money and guns. So this caused the Soviet Union to do the same thing with North Vietnam. Since North Vietnam wanted to reunite Vietnam together as one, they had to invade South Vietnam, so they declared war on South Vietnam. In the South, a group called Viet Cong, which was a bunch of communist fighters backed by North Vietnam, hated how the president was running the country, so they started fighting against them. So they started fighting against the South by using guerrilla warfare. So this caused the USA to start training South Vietnam troops, while the Soviet Union in the North started training the Northern Vietnam troops. In the South, Southern Vietnam troops were struggling to fight against the Viet Cong, so the USA realized that they had to step in. As if they don't, we're stopping countries like Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, or Laos from turning into communist countries. So they started sending troops to fight against the Viet Cong. When the US entered the war, they thought it was going to be easy victory, but boy, they were wrong. The Viet Cong troops used the jungle as a shield to hide themselves from the US troops, while the Viet Cong troops pretended to be civilians so they could surprise attack the US troops. And they also set up booby traps along the way to catch any unsuspecting victim. Though the US did launch a bombing raid over North Vietnam, which was called Operation Rolling Thunder, which tried to force North Vietnam to stop supporting Viet Cong, which didn't work. By 1968, the US was telling their people that they were totally winning the war, but their lies were soon going to be revealed. During January 1968, North Vietnam launched an offensive called the Tet Offensive, which mainly failed, but it did do one thing. It showed the Americans at home that they weren't completely winning the war. The Americans who were watching the war on the TV saw all the casualties that were happening, and the people who were pro-war were eventually switching sides. At this point, the USA realized the war wasn't winnable and that North Vietnam wouldn't give up. So they started pulling out troops, and by 1973, they signed the Paris Peace Accord, which basically left South Vietnam alone to fight. And eventually, North Vietnam defeated South Vietnam and reunited Vietnam together as one. Over 3 million people died, so what did we learn from this situation? To not fight in a jungle.